One final bonus question. This is just for fun. I like asking people this. What's going to be the first vegan nation in the world? Just a guess.
First vegan nation.
So yesterday I had the honor of interviewing two of the most outspoken and effective animal rights activists that I know of, James Aspey and Carly Taylor, for the first episode in a new series I'm going to be doing called Smarter Vegan. So the idea behind the Smarter Vegan series is that while anyone who's involved in the animal rights movement knows that every day we're seeing victory after victory, good news after good news, whether it's another major food company unveiling some new murder-free products, whether it's a major celebrity going vegan, new animal rights laws being passed, all we do is win, 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 it seems like. Cool. Only problem is that none of that is good enough for the approximately 3,000 animals who are being slaughtered every single second. And that's just counting the animals who live on land. When you count the sentient beings who live at sea, the number is more like...
Yeah, 8 billion a day if you include sea animals, which you should.
Yeah.
So 8 billion animals slaughtered a day.
That's more than the entire human population every single day. And that's why we need to pick up the pace of the animal rights movement. It's why we need to not just move faster, but we need to move smarter. And that's why I spoke to people who I think are achieving great things, who are accomplishing great results in this movement. And while you're watching this video, if anybody crosses your mind, who you think is a great leader, who you think is effective, whether it's in-person, face-to-face activism, whether it's someone involved in videos, if there's anyone that you think should be next in the series, leave a comment. Now, I brought 3 microphones to the interview, but one of them was giving me issues, so naturally I gave James and Carly the good microphones, which ended up meaning, though, that my questions were really hard to hear. So I'm just going to tell you what I asked them, and then we can cut to their answers. So my first question revolved around the basic idea of this series. The idea that 8 billion lives every single day revolve around, which is how do we accelerate the animal rights revolution? Let's hear what they had to say.
In general, I guess, just focusing on the mainstream, focusing on the people who are not yet vegan and the psychology behind getting them to hear the things we want them to hear, instead of focusing a lot of our attention on just speaking to other vegans. I think it's really, really important that we all use the skills and the talents that we have to try to affect people who are not vegan. And that's gonna look different depending on who you are and what you're good at, and and situation by situation, I guess.
Yeah, I think as well that by far the best tool we have is social media. So learning how to utilize social media, how to create content for YouTube, for Facebook, for Instagram, for Twitter, because that way, instead of having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, you can have a one with a million people or even more, and everybody has at least a couple of hundred people generally who they can reach every single day. So just realizing the power of that audience and that platform that you've got and using it strategically. You can't just put animal rights, veganism, slaughterhouse all day, every day, because people will just tune out and block you. So you've got to be strategic. It's got to be, in my opinion, a good way to do it is a combination of some lighthearted things, some funny things, some recipes, some facts, some quotes, some slaughterhouse, some meals, you know, just a good balance of everything that ticks a lot of boxes when people are objecting because they think they can't go vegan for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize that if you only post sad and depressing footage, you're probably going to end up getting unfollowed by all your friends who aren't vegan, even some of your friends who are vegan, and then you're not going to end up doing any good for the animals. Now, if you look at the internet in general, if you look at social media in general, it seems to be dominated by cute content and funny content. So what can we learn from that? Well, we're fighting for animals who are by nature cute and adorable. So we should be using that for the animal's advantage, and showing an animal who is being treated kindly by a human can be just as powerful as showing an animal who's being treated poorly. If people see cows in the same light as we see dogs and cats, as our friends, not food, that can help people rethink things. And it can also help, when you do see the images of them being abused, it can increase the sensitivity that we have towards them, the empathy that we're going to have towards their suffering. As far as humor, there's obviously nothing funny about animal abuse, but there is a lot of funny things about people's excuses for abusing animals. So that opens up a lot of potential for comedy.
Yeah, that goes a long way, I think, keeping it funny, because people who are still not vegan can kind of laugh at themselves and realize, oh yeah, I am a bit of a hypocrite, or yeah, I am drinking cow breast milk. That is pretty weird.
Yeah.
These vegans actually have a point, and when you use humor, it sort of disarms their defenses, which can be a big hurdle between somebody hearing what they need to hear.
Yeah. Next, I wanted to know what James and Carly thought about what we might be doing wrong as a movement? What are some of the counterproductive things that maybe we should be doing a bit less of?
Yeah, I sometimes still do things in the heat of the moment that I think, oh, I should have done that differently. That probably pushed this person further away. I think getting into arguments instead of getting into discussions, and making it a, polarizing, it's us versus them kind of thing. Sometimes I write that as a title of a video because it's interesting, but the conversation is very much just a conversation. Generally, when I think it's most effective. So yeah, just remembering that you weren't vegan once, and not judging people so harshly just because they're not vegan yet. I just don't have the knowledge, or there's something that's holding them back, and just realizing that they're not our enemies. We should be trying to lift everybody up rather than drive people further down. So I just think that being understanding and patient with people goes a long way. So some of the counterproductive things is forgetting that, and also I think if we are not considering that there are certain challenges people go through when going vegan, just telling someone to go vegan overnight is not very practical. Being practical with solutions, also practical with the farmers. What are they going to do? These are real problems that are coming up, and it helps to have compassion for them as well, who are going to lose their job and their, whatever, they don't know any better. So also, remembering that we have to have compassion for other humans as well.
And building on that point that James just made there, I actually saw some statistics once on why people go vegan. And the number one reason listed was the influence of friends and family. And then number 2 and 3 and most of the other things on the graph had to do with the influence of videos, whether it was documentaries, whether it was content they saw on social media. And when you think about that influence of friends and family, that might just mean that your brother, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your friend told you to go watch Earthlings, told you to go watch one of James's videos. And so we can never overstate the importance of social media, of video making.
Absolutely, yeah. And if the whole conversation isn't perfect and you think, oh, I'll throw this one away, maybe there's 1 minute there where you said something good that can just plant a seed to the audience that you have. And don't worry about not having 1 million followers or whatever, because a couple of hundred and getting 50 views means that one outreach conversation was times by 50. It's incredible.
And those numbers seriously add up. Now, I always remind myself on a daily basis that the average person eats between 100 to 200 animals a year. So even if you don't convince someone to go vegan on the spot, even if one person just ends up reducing their consumption of animals, so they eat fewer animals every year, each one of those animals' lives means everything to them, just the way that your own life means everything to you. So never underestimate the importance of your activism.
Yeah, it all goes such a long way, and realize that the knowledge that you have is worth sharing. Some people think, oh, I can't say it as good as this activist, or, I'm not doing as much as that person or whatever. But really, if you try to think back to before you were vegan, it's a total different mindset, it's a total different way of looking at the world, and just sharing that with people. You don't need to know the answer to every single question to put just how you made the connection, why you went vegan, some of the meals that you eat now. Just putting that out there goes a really long way.
And it'll influence the people closest to you who you can follow up with when you see them. So next I wanted to pivot to seeing what James and Carly thought about 3 of the key ideas that I have for how we as a movement can improve our activism, can improve our outreach, can improve our results. So my first key idea is that words are weapons. We're not living in a time right now where we're using guns and swords to make a difference. We're using videos, we're using persuasion. So how do we make our words more effective? Now, the main thing I want you to think about is that the words meat, the words veal, the words poultry, pork, were invented as euphemisms to distract people from the fact that they're eating animals, to help people live in a delusion so they don't remind themselves every time they go to the supermarket that they're eating a dead animal. We as vegans shouldn't be helping people live in that delusion. We shouldn't be using these euphemisms. There's certain practical occasions where, okay, fine, you might want to use them. But in general, call dead animals what they are. Instead of talking about eating meat, talk about eating animals. And I'm not saying this to be, a grammar Nazi. I'm a fucking rapper. I don't care about grammar. I'll bend grammar however I see fit to get the message across. I'm doing this because I honestly think it's effective so that every single time you have a conversation, people are remembering that that's an animal, that that's a cow, that that's a pig. It's not these other euphemisms. Now, James is actually one of the last people I needed to point that out to because he's pretty awesome in already using that more powerful, more accurate vocabulary when he speaks about animals. But I still wanted to say it out loud and see what his thoughts were, and I hope that maybe you guys hearing it from James would make an impact too.
Well, that's a good point actually. Though I talk like that most of the time, but also I think strategically I don't always talk like that. Sometimes I do use the euphemisms because I want to speak to the language of that the people understand.
Yeah.
I talk like that sometimes, but then I generally try to also add the other stuff because I want people to know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Meat, yeah, I can relate to that. I totally agree. Helping them connect to, no, actually, it's not just meat. You're eating animals. You're drinking milk from a cow made for her babies. But I think it's sort of person dependent. Like if someone's really never even sort of taken any steps or heard much about it, sometimes I think maybe a better way is to talk about meat, talk about just milk, eggs. But yeah, I think also it's so important to challenge those normal words that have been used to just sort of make people think of it not for what it is. And I totally agree. That's a really strong point.
And I also find that you can kind of bring humor and get someone's defenses down a little bit by using those terms because they sound so ridiculous a lot of the time. I was at the grocery store, this was probably a couple years ago. I was nannying for a vegan family and I was trying to find them coconut yogurt. I was grocery shopping for them. And they were all out on the shelf of all the plant-based yogurts. So I went to the guy who was working there and I was like, do you guys have any yogurts without any breast milk in it? And he was like, what? And I was like, oh, like just any yogurts that don't have like cow or goat like breast milk in it. And he's like, oh, yeah, let me check. And then like it was kind of funny because like I wasn't being aggressive with it. Like I was saying the objective truth, but kind of with like a little bit of a laugh, like, isn't that ridiculous that that's in yogurt? So it was like I find that sometimes using the objective terminology for what these products are in a way that's a little bit more lighthearted is still like really planting a strong seed, but with an air of like, oh, we can joke around about this and I'm not gonna be like super, I guess, defensive. I don't know, it's worked really well to do that. So I totally agree.
Yeah, the term normal, that's the thing. We say like, oh, this is the vegan ice cream, that's the normal ice cream. That's one thing I try and avoid. Like that's cow ice cream.
Yeah.
That's coconut ice cream. That's
exactly,
almond milk.
exactly.
You know, like so saying what it is. You know, that's a cow burger, that's plant-based burger. You know? But,
no, and then it puts it in their head. So next time they are looking at the same product, my funny joke or like the way that someone said it to them might just be in their head for a split second. So I find that it just plants like that seed that who knows what that's going to manifest into in terms of their actions and their behavior next time when you're not there.
Yeah.
And the flip side to that is us taking over the word meat. Now, if you look in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the definition of the word meat, and this is going back from hundreds of years ago when modern English was created, already included plant-based foods. This is before the Beyond Burger was invented. So while most vegans are already fine about taking over the term ice cream, pizza, cheese, we're understandably a bit hesitant to take over the word meat. But here's the thing. Meat to most people is a kind of food. It's not a dead animal. The idea of meat in people's brains is something delicious, something tasty. So rather than fight against that, let's work with it. Let's talk about vegan meat, plant-based meat. Please never use the words fake meat, faux meat. Who the hell wants to eat something that's fake? Lots of people want to eat things that are plant-based, so let's take over the term, let's make it ours, because we want our food to be more appetizing. You know, it's the carrot and the stick. We want people to realize how disgusting it is that they're eating a dead carcass, and we want people to realize how appetizing it is to eat plant-based food, and calling it what it is, which is vegan meat, can only help with that.
Or like coconut meat. Like there are so many plant-based meats that are objectively meat. It's the edible part of that food, right? So when we're talking about like animal meat, what we're talking about is like assholes and eyeballs and nostrils and like so things that people don't really associate with food. So like when we take that back, we're just like, no, this is meat. Like it's not fake meat, it's not vegan meat. This is just this is meat, right? And then you can kind of flip it around and be like, that mutilated corpse you're eating in the shape of a plant-based product is actually the fake one. So you can do the flip on them when we use those terminologies.
Now the next key point I wanted to make is that animal rights is politics. Politics is not part of the animal rights struggle. Animal rights is politics. And I'm making this point because I've encountered a lot of vegans who will say something which to me sounds completely crazy, which is that, oh, we shouldn't talk about politics because that's too controversial. You know, it gets people too riled up one way or another. We should be neutral. Since when have vegans cared about controversy? Not eating bacon is controversial. Slaughterhouses are controversial. Fighting against the rodeo and SeaWorld is controversial, okay? Yeah, politics is controversial, but by its nature, the animal rights movement is political. The dead giveaway is in the term animal rights. If we're going to win animal rights, that's not a euphemism, that's not a metaphor. We literally want animals to have legal rights. That's going to happen in the parliaments and the congresses of the world. Animal rights need to be enshrined into law. Now, I've already said a lot about how American politics relates to animal rights, and you can check out I made a couple videos, but you can check out these two. They're the most relevant into understanding it. You could check out this comprehensive article that I wrote about how the Republican Party and Donald Trump have been engaged in mass murder of animals since they took office, and how tens of millions of animals would still be alive today if Hillary Clinton was president versus Donald Trump. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. For a lot of activism we're going to be doing about the upcoming Canadian election. But I don't really know much about Australian politics, and I heard some awesome things about animal rights activists being elected to the Australian Parliament. So I wanted to ask James about that.
Recently?
James
Yeah.
was.
Government? Yeah.
Well,
Were you elected?
No, I just put my name in for a paper candidacy so
Okay.
that I could help the party out, the Animal Justice Party.
Okay. And did you get, so people were actually voting
Yeah,
to get
yeah.
elected, or?
We got enough votes for the party in each
district or something?
district,
Yeah.
so that yeah, she got elected.
So you have a representative in Parliament?
Yeah, we've got
Animal
we've got
Justice
three
Party.
now. We've got three now, I think.
That's fantastic.
So good. Yeah.
So
Next, I want to talk about something very controversial, which is the issue of animal rights versus animal welfare. Now, I don't really think this is a versus issue, even though some people have portrayed it that way. Now, a lot of people justifiably point out that if we were to, help with this idea of animal welfare and give the false sense that, oh, it's okay to eat animals as long as they weren't tortured to death during their lives, you could kill them in the end, but, at least they weren't tortured. Now, obviously, nobody would want to be killed even if you weren't tortured during their life, so that's completely opposed to the idea of animal rights. And we shouldn't be lying to people, and we shouldn't be encouraging the idea that it's okay to eat animals. But the flip side to this, that I think a lot of vegans don't consider, is that the reason that animals are being tortured en masse in factory farms, in animal agriculture, is not necessarily because the people who are doing it to them are sadistic. There are sadistic people who work in animal agriculture, but the entire system is sadistic. Why is it sadistic? For pure economic reasons. It's simply cheaper to cram birds into those tiny little cages than it is to give them space. They chop pigs' tails off, pigs' testicles off with no anesthetics, because if they didn't, for one reason or another, it would cost them more in the process. The food would be more expensive. They would make less profit. The flip side to that is that when we pass laws that outlaw various forms of torture in animal agriculture, so on the one hand, obviously you're reducing the amount of torture, which is by itself good. On the other hand, you're making things more expensive. You're making the process more expensive for the companies that are murdering animals and for the consumers. And we have empirical statistics to prove that when the price of animal foods goes up, the consumption goes down. So the bottom line is that when you improve animal welfare laws, you are both reducing the amount of torture in the world and the amount of killing in the world.
I think it's great, man. I think it's great it's going to happen anyway.
yeah.
And I think maybe that's an argument from rights activists, is that if we just focus on rights and animal rights and veganism and abolishing the entire thing, that the response from industry will be to improve welfare out of fear and pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that while there's a good amount of people focusing on just that, I think it's also great that people are focusing on, I don't want the end goal to be bigger cages and more comfort and happier lives, but if I was in those cages, I would appreciate that in the meantime. So I think we totally should do that as well, and help out each other when it comes to passing those laws. And then, like you said, it makes things more costly for them. It makes it less lucrative. It makes it harder to stay above the red kind of thing. And I think all those things just add more pressure to people thinking, well, there's this other movement going on. Maybe I should just start making plant milks instead and transform my farm or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's really important. And I think if we were those animals in that situation, of course, that's what we would want as well. We want people fighting for our rights. And in the meantime, because that's not going to happen overnight, in the meantime, also improving our living conditions.
For those of you who are still hesitant to support those campaigns, first of all, I'm not saying you should drop your animal rights activism and become an animal welfare activist. I'm just saying that we should stop opposing them, because there are vegans who actually oppose these campaigns.
Although I think that sometimes it's good to have that really strong hardline vegan out there saying that, just to remind everyone, no, this is very serious and that's not enough.
Yeah.
But strategically, I think both are important.
Yeah.
And while I totally agree with that from the I guess, like the government side of things. I think in our advocacy, while I totally encourage people to, you know, if you want to go vegetarian first or do meatless Mondays, as long as you're on your path to like going vegan, that's the end goal.
Yeah.
I think that there's harm in advocating for like higher welfare standards, animal products on their way to going vegan. Like that's something that I never personally do because at least with me personally, I know that for the longest time before I went vegan, I was getting like free range, organic eggs, and just like, it was just easing my cognitive dissonance just enough to like be able to not go vegan. So I think that, I just don't think that is nearly as effective a strategy as just encouraging reduction as much as possible with where they are to like on their path towards veganism, and saying there really is no such thing as a more ethical animal product because it always involves them going to the same slaughterhouse, and just bringing it back to that. Does not matter about the conditions. What we're talking about here is the slaughterhouse that they all go to. So like that's, I think, an important distinction that we can support that on like a law-making level and a lobbying level, but from an individual level and what we're doing as activists to encourage like individual change, I don't think that it is an effective step on the path in my experience.
It's confusing to do that to people.
Exactly.
Make them think that there's a nice way to do the wrong thing.
When what we're talking about here is the use, really, more than anything.
Although one point is that any step somebody takes, even if it doesn't necessarily help animals, if they think it does and they feel good about that step, they might be inclined to take another step and just have momentum behind those kind of actions. But overall, I think definitely, you know, what we see results with people advocating, no, this should be completely abolished, and here's the alternatives that are available right now.
Take the time you need. And
like hurry up, but do it in your pace. We see results like that all the time. So I don't think there's much need on a one-on-one basis to advocate for anything less than cutting these products out of your life completely.
So there's an important difference that James and Carly pointed out there between political activism and one-on-one face-to-face outreach. When it comes to one-on-one face-to-face outreach, we are always on the side of animal rights. And we're on the side of animal rights politically too. The thing is that we need to be pragmatic because vegans are not yet 51% of the population. However, there are huge amounts of people who will agree to all kinds of laws that can be passed today if we were politically organized that would save animals' lives and would reduce the suffering they're going through. So politically, we need to be winning everything we can in terms of animal rights and animal welfare, and one-on-one, we need to be doing pure animal rights activism. And speaking of that magic number of 51%, my final key idea that I want to get out in this series is the concept of going for the low-hanging fruit. Now, a lot of people, when they're engaged in activism, we're drawn to argument. We're drawn to controversy. Now, people might want to argue with Hunter about why they do is wrong, and maybe you'll convince them, but it's probably going to be an uphill struggle. On the flip side, anyone who's ever spoken to an environmentalist, anyone involved in left-wing politics,
yoga people, vegetarians,
Feminists.
it's like because that's the thing. We don't need to convince everyone to stop eating animals to shut down the slaughterhouses. We can get to 50.1% and it's over. So we need to think, who are the easiest slices of the population who are already leaning towards veganism, who are already sympathetic to animals, sympathetic to our message, sympathetic to the environmental impact, the health impact, the human rights impact of animal rights, because there's a massive, massive, massive correlation between improved animal rights and human rights. You know, I told James and Carly about my experience living in the United States for 2 years, and I was working in an office where literally every single person was a Democrat. There was zero Trump supporters there. Everyone's a progressive. You know, everyone hates Trump. So my experience talking about veganism and animal rights to people was amazing. There was literally 0 ounces of opposition anytime I brought up animal rights. Every time I did, it was like the other person was basically bragging about how plant-based, how close to veganism they already are. They'd be like, oh, you're vegan. Oh, did you know about that vegan pizza place over here? You know, incredible conversations. Like, I didn't need to convince them about anything. It's really just, they're already at that stage where they just needed practical advice. Oh, this recipe, whatever. It's a lot easier than trying to argue with someone who just wants to argue with you, who's opposed to you, who's super closed-minded. Because remember, the animals don't have time for ineffective tactics. They don't have time for us to waste our time. We're the ones fighting for them. But on a positive note, I just want to remind you that we are a lot closer to a vegan world than many people may think.
Absolutely.
I honestly think it's 5 years.
Yeah.
I think 5 years. James is like, I don't know, that's pretty optimistic, but...
In the United States and Canada right now, we're about 6% of the population. That means if every vegan persuades just one other person to stop eating animals and animal products over the course of a year, we're at 12% of the population. Replicate that again, one person just talks to one person, we are 24% of the population, almost a quarter. Replicate that one more time, and we're basically at half the population. Inch that up a few more percentage points, and we win.
Yeah, and I personally think the world's gonna go vegan before everyone becomes like anti-speciesist. You know what I mean? I think it's just gonna be like, okay, cool. Like, I can get a Beyond Burger at Timmy's with my breakfast sandwich. I'll just do that instead. Yeah. Like, and it's gonna get so convenient and become so accessible that like to choose like intentionally not to do that, everyone's just gonna be like, what? Like, you still use plastic bags? Like that kind of thing. What? You're still eating animal products?
Exactly.
So it's like even people that aren't that don't get it for a little while longer, because I don't think that everyone's gonna have this like compassionate revolution. I hope that's what happens, but I don't think that's what's gonna happen. I just think it's gonna be for every reason. It's gonna be, the information's gonna be out there so widespread that everyone's gonna know that it makes sense to go vegan for everything you claim to care about in the world.
Right.
So it's gonna be like, yeah, I'll just do it, like just out of, it's right here and it's cheaper and it's better for the environment and it doesn't contribute to world hunger and it's better for my health and it's just, I think it's just gonna be a no-brainer, like so soon. Like as long as we have alternatives to everything people want, which we're like there almost, we're like 70-80% there. Like, yeah, it's gonna, we're so close to it.
Then we got sidetracked talking about the game changers once again, and how one scene in particular is going to make a lot of men want to go vegan for a very specific part of their anatomy, and how, you know, even if someone is going vegan for self-interest, that still benefits the animals the same.
And it's also, what you just said kind of ties into the idea that even if people go vegan or eat plant-based for reasons that have nothing to do with animals, like them taking that step in that direction makes the cognitive dissonance so much like less intense in terms of them coming up with excuses to justify what they're doing, right? So initially when I cut out dairy, it was for my skin. I had really bad acne. I was like, let me try to do this to reduce inflammation. And then it took me doing that for a few weeks and then me watching a video about the dairy industry to be like, oh, I'm already not doing this. So yeah, of course it's wrong. And it's like, it just makes it so much easier for your brain to make that connection, like, yeah, this is wrong if you're not paying for it, right? And I think that's what's gonna happen with people like going into it for their sport or for their health. Like,
then it was wrong the whole time.
Totally, and then they're gonna watch that video and be like, right, oh yeah, I'm so glad I don't eat that. Like, even though, you know, so yeah, it's the foot in the door effect, I guess.
Yeah. One final bonus question. This is just for fun. I like asking people this. What's gonna be the first vegan nation in the world? Just a guess.
First vegan nation.
I think Israel.
Yeah, seems like Israel's on the way there. And with Tal in there, they seem to be really moving forward. Yeah.
When we were there, what was
although a lot's happening right here, right now. Canada.
Or England
I'm on
as
Team
well.
Canada.
UK. Yeah.
Australia.
I think Australia.
Yeah.
It'll be really interesting. But I think we're all we're all moving in that direction, and we can see big changes happening everywhere. Yeah. I think the biggest thing we're probably seeing is just the convenience factor has gone through the roof. Yeah. And that is one of the most important things. So yeah, it's just gonna keep snowballing, and we're definitely, whatever we're doing, that's what I tell people, whatever we're doing, just keep doing it because it's clearly working. Yeah, more of it.
And think about how you can bring your own talents and skills to the table, which is what I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, that people don't have to, if they don't want to do a cube of truth or a vigil, like those are incredible forms of activism for lots of reasons, but like whatever you're good at, find a way to bring that to like, how can I push the world towards veganism using what I'm good at? If you're really good at cooking, if you're really good at art, like if you're good at video editing, if you're good at doing public speaking, like anything where you can think of a way to integrate that into like affecting that niche group of people, because we need people in like all the niches with all the talents and abilities to be bringing their unique skills to the table.
And she's talking about you. I'd love to hear your ideas about how we can improve the efficiency of our activism, how we can accelerate the pace of the animal rights revolution, and what are we doing to shoot ourselves in the foot? What are we doing to slow ourselves down that we could be doing less of? And don't forget to tell me who you think should be next in the interview series. Thank you once again to James and Carly for taking the time to speak to me. And shout out to the entire V-Gang around the world for doing your thing and being fucking amazing. Thank you.